What's up, y'all? TBrown31 here with JaboctheGreat. Welcome back to The Last Word. Once again, we have a big weekend in football, but no bigger game that everybody is talking about. Ravens Cowboys yesterday afternoon. Don't be deceived by the score. This was an all-time embarrassment for the Cowboys. We're going to talk all about this defense here in just a second, man, because that is obviously the story. But we talked last week, in our picks. Both these teams have a lot on the line. The Cowboys are 1-1, having come off that huge loss to the Saints. Ravens lost 2 straight to start their season. Of course, starting 0-2 is not ideal, especially for the team that had the best record in the league last year and the league MVP. Ravens, they showed up in this game. They showed out. Derrick Henry, especially that run game with Lamar Jackson. The Cowboys defense, though, completely different story.
Yeah, we talked about it. It was going to be a big day on the ground, and it's not that Lamar did not pass well. They had a great game in the air. Lamar was very efficient, very just kind of like cutting them up. But on the ground, this Ravens team had a feast. We knew that the Cowboys' run defense was a bit of a problem against the Saints. Obviously, Alvin Kamara put them, on a on a T-shirt. The Ravens took that formula and said, okay, we won't have somebody do it quite as much as Kamara did, but we will collectively beat you up with the running game, and that is what happened. So Lamar Jackson went 12 for 15, only 3 missed passes. Great day for him. 182 yards, 1 touchdown, no turnovers. Second in rushing on the team with 87 yards, and he got himself a rushing touchdown, and he avoided being sacked at all. So I mean, he missed 3 passes, but otherwise, I don't know if you could ask for a better day for a quarterback. He threw a low amount, still got up to 200 yards. Got himself a touchdown in the air, and got almost 100 yards on the ground with a touchdown. Never sacked, never turned it over. Great day for Lamar Jackson. Bigger day for Derrick Henry, who has not had his big day yet. yeah. For the Ravens, Derrick Henry has kind of been there. He's gotten a few scores, but this is the one where he reminded us that, all right, yeah, that's right. The Ravens have Derrick Henry. He leads the game on the ground with 151 yards, and that feels low for what had happened. It's a big number. It's a lot to get for one running back. But it feels like he was doing so much more. I mean, he's just a massive presence. When he has one of these big games, it's hard to kind of like not notice where he's at. And he gets 2 touchdowns on the ground. So big day, 151 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns for him on the ground. And he also had a 23-yard reception on his one target in the air. So did everything you could ask for him to do. Massive day. Cut up the Cowboys, beat them up, whatever way you want to phrase it. Derrick Henry was a force that the Cowboys could not really do anything against. Justice Hill, just to throw him a little mention, had 33 yards on the ground. He's going to be, I think, a good kind of like, second back in there. But with Lamar and Derrick Henry, these guys are going to eat up most of the rushing yards. The air game was led by Nelson Aguilar, with just 1 catch, but 56-yard catch. So massive one for him. And then Charlie Kolar also only had 1 catch, but was second in receiving with 30 yards. Rashad Bateman brought in the Ravens' only air touchdown. He had 28 yards on 3 receptions. And then Marcus Williams recovered a Dak fumble. And we'll have some bad things to talk about with the Ravens. Obviously, this starts out being a beatdown, and the score is going to make it look like it wasn't that. It still kind of was, but you got to kind of look to the Ravens and what they did in the past 2 weeks and think that what they did in the second half of this game was a little scary. But perhaps scarier for Ravens fans, and maybe just people that don't want to be old, is that Justin Tucker is losing it. He's just not the same guy. He's missed a lot of field goals. I think he's leading the NFL in missed field goals so far this year.
Yeah.
And that is crazy. That is a weird thing to perceive. And the kicker opposite of him in this game is starting to become really good, and we'll talk about him in a little bit. But aside from the Ravens' slight collapse issues towards the end of this half, I would say the big thing for this one is Justin Tucker's got to start hitting field goals. There's a few times now this season where an extra 3 points or so would be really big for this Ravens team. Now for the Cowboys, these stats are going to seem really good, and it all comes from the second half. Dak, his completion percentage is horrible. 28 for 51, it's not horrible, but it's a lot of passes. 379 yards is great, 2 touchdowns, no picks. That's good. He had a rushing touchdown with 7 yards on the ground. Don't really anticipate Dak to get that many rushing TDs, so big one for him in that one. Speaking of rushing yards, the running game for the Cowboys in this one, just not super viable. They kind of lost it super early as they went down 14-0 really quickly, or 14-3, something like that. Rico Dowdle, however, is the leader in rushing with 32 yards. Zeke got 6 yards, so just not looking to him in this one. Jake Ferguson led the Cowboys in the air with 6 catches for 97 yards, proving more that Dak has had a good track record of kind of getting a good rhythm with a tight end, but no touchdowns for Ferguson. CeeDee Lamb is the next guy up for receiving with 67 yards, but it'd be Cavante Turpin who had 51 yards and Jalen Tolbert who had 42 yards to get the 2 touchdowns. And then obviously Dak had 400 yards, he had to go somewhere. Hunter Luepke was the one who got 41 more of those yards. As I mentioned, Mark Williams recovered a Dak fumble, so indeed Dak did fumble. But the positives here, Brandon Aubrey hit a 65-yard field goal in this game, 1 yard short of Justin Tucker's record. I just talked about Justin Tucker being on Washed Watch. That's a bad word combination. They sound like the same thing. And Brandon Aubrey is here to let the old man know that it's time to step aside and let somebody else hit a 66-yarder, 1 yard short of that record, but big game for Brandon Aubrey. And I know that you have Aubrey in fantasy, so I'm sure that's been a positive for you, despite whatever else may be going on. I'll pass it to you here. The Ravens did have a 28-6 lead, but typical Raven fashion this season, for some reason they start to lose it. The Cowboys come back and make it from 28-6, make it 28-25. However, the Ravens get the ball on one last drive and are able to go, okay, we have to stop, and they put it together and just kind of run out the clock with their last drive, make sure the Cowboys don't get the ball back and escape being 0-3. They're now 1-2. There's hope for Baltimore. The Cowboys are 1-2, but I don't think it's too much to panic over, except, as I'm sure you'll talk about, that defense is not good.
Yeah, my main issue with Baltimore is just the fourth quarter got outscored 19-0. Didn't keep their gas keep their foot on the gas, for much of that fourth quarter until the end of it, where they did come up with that first down at late in the game to seal it. But outside of that, I really didn't have any issues with Baltimore's game, and they absolutely needed this win as the Steelers moved to 3-0. So even if the Bengals win tonight, they'll only be 1-2. Browns, they lost again, so they're still 1-2, so they're all tied, pending a Bengals win, except for the Steelers, who are already 2 games ahead. So they absolutely needed this win, not for just the division, but just for making the playoffs in general. Justin Tucker, though, I will say, it seems like he's old, but he's really not that old. He's only 34, so it's not like that old for kicker. But it definitely seems like this season he just doesn't have it so far, compared to his contemporary Brandon Aubrey, who, I mean, I don't know. Maybe last week he could have probably kicked that 70-yard and maybe he would have made it, but that was the only thing positive for the Cowboys, except for maybe a little bit of the end game. I don't want to say it was garbage time because they ended up losing by 3. And I know that's a huge criticism for the Cowboys, especially back in that playoff game against the Packers, where they were down like 28-0 or whatever, and then they started putting on stats and this and that. At the end, that didn't really mean much, but this one I won't call it empty calories just because they lost. They did come back and almost, they put some pressure on the Ravens there at the end, getting that onside kick, then getting down the field a couple times, but outside of that, there's nothing really positive for the Cowboys here. Look, you would have thought coming out of last week, getting beat up like that on the ground, getting beat up, 40 points, like allowing 40 on your defense. I mean, you would have thought last week, all right, they're going to come in this week, albeit against what you would expect to be a pretty good running team with Lamar and Derrick Henry. Obviously, like you mentioned, Derrick Henry hadn't really had the greatest first couple of games, so we talked about it last week. If the Ravens want to win, they're going to have to run the ball, and they're going to have to run the ball with Derrick Henry. He's got to get 20 plus carries in this one. Lamar's going to have to run the ball too. They both did that really well. They accounted for about 250 yards together. So they did their job there. The Cowboys absolutely did not do their job on defense. And look, the Cowboys probably just aren't built to really stop the run, but how bad they've been stopping the run is just atrocious. And I see a lot of former players saying stopping the run is just kind of more of an effort thing compared to stopping the pass. I mean, even nowadays, passing in the NFL, like that's that's what the NFL wants. I mean, you got all these young, great quarterbacks who, truth be told, haven't been playing that great this season to start off with. But you got all these young, great quarterbacks. The game is moving in that direction. Passing is just what's being featured. That's what's going to be easier to do. So players are always like, we can deal with getting beat up through the air. We don't like it, but we can kind of deal with it. But allowing almost 300 yards rushing, that's effort, that's toughness, that's grit, that's all that. Cowboys didn't have any of it. I mean, you got CD, and then this is offense too, but you got CD like out of losing his mind. I mean, he didn't have a good game at all. Um, not a good game for him. It seems like that connection with him and Dak right now is just not really there. It may be part of it, with the contract talks and everything like that. But they haven't been connecting the way they used to. Run game doesn't exist. It's just nothing. And run defense again. I mean, they're just getting run over. And I know this isn't prime Derrick Henry, and I know Derrick Henry is still a really good running back, but there's just no reason to let somebody run you over the way they did. And I see a lot of people calling the Cowboys front runners. I don't really like to say that about teams. I see a lot of people say that about the Warriors. I don't really like saying that, but I get the sentiment because if the Cowboys get down 14-3 like they did in the first quarter, they're just dead. And barring a crazy fourth quarter like they did where they almost came back and won, they're just dead. If you get a couple scores up on them in the first quarter, they're just demoralized at home. The crowd gets out of it, and they're all defeated on the sidelines, arguing, yelling at each other. I mean, this is not a team. This is not reflective of a team that has been to the playoffs every year for the past 3 years, 12 win seasons for the past 3 years. Take the playoff results out of it. This should be a much better team than what we're seeing right now. And this is why I said, disregard the score. It's deceiving. Again, they were good at the end, come back, but Cowboys, they need to take a long look in the mirror. And you can blame the DC, you can blame Mike Zimmer. Now, you could have blamed Dan Quinn, I guess, in the playoff game against the Packers, but at the end of the day, it's the players. So they got to take a long look in the mirror. And I understand, they were talking after the game. Mike is saying this, Dak saying this, you got these guys saying this. Lawrence saying, DeMarcus Lawrence was saying some stuff like, I get trying to hold each other accountable, but you got to hold yourself accountable first. So, and I know Micah, obviously, he's a pass rusher. And you can't really pass rush if you're getting run all over the entire game. But again, you're the best guy on defense. You got to start with yourself. But he was right in saying, you can't have everybody out there trying to be Superman. Cowboys, they got to take a long look in the mirror, like I said. And they got a game against the Giants this week too, and that's going to be a short week. Giants might be able to catch them. I'm not going to pick the Giants right now, obviously, but you never know. Great performance by the Ravens. Hopefully they can carry that momentum into a huge game against Buffalo next week. Piss poor performance by the Cowboys.
Yeah, and I think just before we close this here, it is worth noting that this game against the Giants comes on a short week. It comes on a week after the Giants finally found their footing. Got really connected with Neighbors and Jones. No stupid turnovers, or not really.
Yeah.
They caught fire, and it looks like it's going to be a short week for both of them. But the Cowboys are in a state of disarray. The one thing that I guess you have going for the Giants is that or for the Cowboys, is the Giants don't have like a big guy in the running back room. But if the Giants come in and have somebody run all over the Cowboys, then it might be time to hit the panic button.